really difficult to understand, given that the president renegotiated the U.S., Mexico, Canada free trade agreement in his first term. We used to call it NAFTA, and presumably got what he wanted out of that. And now he wants something else that's somewhat, ill-defined or undefined. They're even talking about in the discussion late in the conversations over the weekend that they wanted to change labeling so they didn't have to put certain things in French in Quebec, where that is the spoken language. And so they're getting into all kinds of things, dictating who Canada can do other trade agreements with. That's not something we would accept, nor would any of our other trading partners. So it's very difficult, other than this kind of really maybe obsessive idea that the president has of making Canada our 51st state and kind of forcing that hand. I'm not.
No. You're getting to where I was going to go.
Oh, sorry.
It's fine. I'm happy you're there, because we have a little bit of sound from the Treasury Secretary being asked about this, because this is frankly what PM Mark Carney says is going on behind the scenes. Let's listen to Bessent's answer.
I think he would like Canada to come to the table and negotiate in good faith. They were offered quite a good deal last week. They chose to reject it. Unfortunately, Prime Minister Carney rose to power on an anti-American, anti-Trump platform. I believe he was more than 20 points behind, and he seems to have gone back to his old playbook. And I think one has to ask oneself, is he trying to benefit himself, the Liberal Party, or the Canadian people?
Okay, so I'm not quite sure if that was the answer to the 51st state question, but he did get asked it because that is the talk.
Yeah, and it's been the talk since President Trump's gotten back into office in his second term. And it certainly doesn't make much sense. We've had phenomenal relations with Canada, both, from a geopolitical perspective and an economic perspective for quite some time. So none of this really makes sense, doesn't seem strategic, and doesn't seem to have a point, particularly since the president was going to try to renegotiate the free trade agreement with Mexico and Canada sometime in the relatively near future. So it seems like everything else that we've seen from an economic policy perspective, scattershot.
Paul, do you make any sense of this?
Yeah, I think a lot of it may come just from Trump's own ill feelings about Canada. And I should point out, too, I think that it may be hard for Americans to fully appreciate just how incredibly insulting all of that 51st state talk was to Canadians. The idea that they are a sovereign country that has an identity independent of the United States, no matter how close we may be, is something that is absolutely fundamental to how Canadians think of themselves. And that reaction is a part of how Canadians and how Prime Minister Carney are going to react to the things that the Trump administration does. And so they are going to want to assert their own sovereignty, their own independence, their own autonomy. And so all of the things that Trump says only makes it more likely that they're going to want to stand up to us. And that in turn may make him even angrier. How dare they not be more appreciative of me and want to retaliate when the U.S. is going to impose tariffs? And I would say one other thing, too. This is going to be it's going to absolutely fall flat with the public. We had a long discussion and debate about the utility of tariffs, and Donald Trump lost that argument. He tried so hard to convince the public that tariffs are great and they produce prosperity and they don't raise prices. And the American people pretty much rejected that argument that he made, and so now a new round of tariffs on Canada, which, by the way, Americans they like Canadians. They like the country of Canada, even if Trump doesn't. I don't see how that's going to get any kind of public support, especially if, as Ron says, it's only going to raise prices.
Honestly, it's like a South Park episode. That's how little it makes sense. Let me try to get into the strategy further with you, Vaughn. Let me first off, we just showed a Paul Krugman headline next to an image of empty shelves, and I want to put that back on the screen so I can explain it. What you're seeing there, buy Canada instead. Canadians are buying Canadian goods instead of American goods. They're buying Canadian liquor instead of American liquor. They are actively protesting the Americans with their wallets in Canada. Look at all those other very full shelves. So they are willing to, they've proven they're willing to withstand economic pain because, as Paul was saying, they are so insulted. Donald Trump is still laying it on. Here's what he said on Truth Social. He says they've been ripping us off. Canada's been ripping off the United States of America for years. Their ridiculously high tariffs on our farmers and farm products has made life impossible for these great American patriots. On January 1st, 2027, tariffs on all cars, trucks, both large and small, automotive parts and steel will be increased to 50%. Is he hearing from people directly in the Oval, farmers in Iowa, car makers, Elon Musk, I don't know, that Canada is the real bad guy here?
Nobody is seemingly able to convince him after 18 months that they're not. Katie, look, 10 days after Donald Trump entered the Oval Office, he signed an executive order placing 25% tariffs on Canada. And why is that important? There was no greater importer of American goods than Canada in 2024 and the years prior. They import 3 times what China imports of American goods. They were the top importer of American goods. What Donald Trump is telling the American public is just so incredibly far off from the facts that it is more than a lack of acknowledgement of what American producers do and the markets that they seek to build. It's literally, if you're an American farmer, right? If you work in the dairy industry, you go to Canada and you try to convince, right, particular buyers to buy your goods. That takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of years of building up those sorts of relationships. And Donald Trump is single-handedly taking an axe to these markets. And Canada, instead of buying American goods, they are explicitly, Mark Carney, now turning towards Europe to strengthen their relationships, despite the body of water in between. And I think it's important to note, Katie, just take the president's words now in that Truth Social post and compare them to 2020. He was literally hailing the USMCA agreement as a victory for manufacturers, for automotives. He was hailing it as a victory for the egg industry, poultry industry, for American dairy farmers. I was at the World Dairy Expo in Madison, Wisconsin, when the USMCA trade agreement was agreed to. And it was American dairy farmers that were cheering, Canadian dairy farmers that were bemoaning it, because Donald Trump actually did get a greater share of American dairy that was being allowed to come into Canada, and an agreement by Canada to even lift some of the low prices on some of their own dairy products here. So I think for the president, it's just, it's so far from the truth being his own words from 6 years ago.
Is it a Trudeau hangover? Trudeau was buddy, I'm serious, buddy with Obama, and Trudeau was prime minister when Donald Trump was first there. Is it just Donald Trump didn't like Trudeau and now he's passing it off on the new guy?
I'm not sure it's that. I mean, he also feels the same way about Mexico. And, what he also doesn't appreciate is the integrated supply chain.
He doesn't speak about Mexico with the same amount of disdain and vitriol.
Well, we were going to bomb the cartels at one point early in his...
bombing the cartels, yes, yeah. But I think there does seem to be something different with the way that he addresses Mexico or Canada.
I'm not sure it's just Trudeau, but Mark Carney was head of the Bank of England, head of the Bank of Canada, Harvard educated, Oxford educated. He's a very different breed of cat than the president is accustomed to dealing with. And he's also a very independent economic thinker and a very strong individual. Trudeau, I mean, I guess there might be some bad blood there, but the president does have this preoccupation with Canada as a vassal state. But we have this integrated supply chain with Canada and Mexico in building automobiles, right, which is critical to the way in which our economy operates. So I don't understand the vitriol. I don't understand the approach to